In our previous video, we've talked about the executive, legislative and financial powers of the President of India. In this video, we're going to talk about the rest of the powers. So we'll be talking about the military powers, the judicial powers, the diplomatic powers, discretionary powers and the emergency powers of the President of India. Let us start with the judicial powers of the President. The President has the power to grant pardon or reduce the punishment that has been given to a person by law. So if a person has been convicted of a crime and has been given a sentence, the President can reduce this sentence. But these are applicable only to certain cases, and there is a limitation on which cases the President can reduce the sentence or grant pardon. For example, if a person has been convicted of a crime and has been given capital punishment, that is death penalty, he can submit his mercy plea to the President, and the President can pardon the death sentence. So, these powers of the President can be absolute as well as conditional, and he exercises these powers on the advice of the Council of Ministers along with the Prime Minister. Secondly, the President has some immunities, that is freedoms from certain legal penalties or actions that make the President different from the citizens of the country. What are these immunities? So the President is not answerable to any court for the discharge of his duties. This is the first immunity. And the second immunity is that no criminal proceedings can be initiated against him during his term of office, which means that no legal proceedings can be initiated against the President during the time of his being the President. These immunities are given to the President so as to ensure that the President can carry out his duties more efficiently. So this means that the President cannot be arrested or imprisoned during his term of office. Why do you think this is given to the President? It is because the President is the nominal head of the country and he has to work according to the advice of the Council of Ministers with the Prime Minister. Whether the President likes the advice or not, he has to work according to that, because that is said in the Constitution. So do you think that the President should be legally held responsible for something that he is supposed to accept as bound by the Constitution? But do you think that if the President runs over someone or if he murders someone, he will go scot-free and not be punished for his crime? That is not so, because we have a provision for the impeachment of the President. So the President can be impeached from his position and then charged with criminal offense. If the President does something unconstitutional, he can be impeached. A resolution for his impeachment can be initiated in either House of Parliament, and once passed by both houses, the President shall be impeached. This immunity is thus not rigid, and it has been provided because the position of the President is a high position and he is the representative of the country, which means that if the President is arrested for something, that would be a loss of face for the country itself. So these immunities are provided, but they are not rigid. So let us go through the judicial powers as we have studied. The President has the power to grant pardon or to reduce the punishment that a person receives. He can reduce the sentence or grant pardon to someone who has been convicted of a crime and been given a punishment. Secondly, the President is not answerable to any court for exercising his powers in office. And thirdly, no criminal proceedings can be initiated against the President during his tenure in office. These two are the immunities that have been given to the President by the Constitution. After studying all the powers of the president, you must be thinking, why do we then need a post of the president if the president is only the nominal head who does not have any real powers? Well, that is not so, because in some situations the president does take his own decisions without the advice of the Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister. So, in these powers, he exercises his own freedom and will. So, his own discretion is used and it is known as discretionary powers. So, the first one is that the president can withhold assent to a bill or send it back for reconsideration except for money bills and constitution amendment bills. So, as we've studied, the president can send a bill back for reconsideration once. But let us understand the first part. That is, the president can withhold assent to a bill. Now, the constitution doesn't give the president a specific time frame within which he has to give his assent to a bill. So, if the president does not assent to a bill or doesn't reject the bill or doesn't send it back for reconsideration, but indefinitely holds on to the bill, he can prevent the bill from being passed. This power is known as the pocket veto. So, what is the pocket veto? If a bill is neither rejected nor returned for reconsideration by the president and kept pending for an indefinite period of time, the president can effectively veto the bill. Which means that if he indefinitely holds on to the bill without acting on it, then the bill is prevented from being passed. This is one of the discretionary powers of the president. The second discretionary power is that when no party or leader enjoys majority support in the Lok Sabha, the president shall have the freedom to decide who should be appointed as Prime Minister. So, we know that the Prime Minister is the leader of the party or the coalition which gets the majority support in the general elections. Now, if one party or one leader does not get a majority support, what happens? We know that the number of elected members in a Lok Sabha is 543. So, to get a majority support, one has to get 50% of 543, that is 272 votes. So, if one gets 272 votes, then he gets the clear majority. But in a situation where no party or no pre-existing coalition gets this majority, then it is known as a hung parliament. When there is a situation of a hung parliament, the president takes over. In this case, the president has the freedom to decide who should be appointed as the Prime Minister. So, the president has to see that if the party which has got the maximum votes is in a position to form a stable government, or if two or more parties will newly form a coalition and run the government. Thus, in the situation of hung parliament, the president has the discretion of appointing the Prime Minister as the leader of the party that gets maximum vote or the leader of the coalition. After this, the president calls the newly formed coalition or the party that has got maximum votes to prove their majority on the floor of the house. And if they successfully get the majority support of the Lok Sabha, then they form the government. When Morarji Desai was the Prime Minister of India, he lost the confidence of the majority of the Lok Sabha. So the then President Neelam Sanjiva Reddy appointed Charan Singh as the new Prime Minister. Charan Singh was from the same party as Morarji Desai, but the new government that was formed was a coalition government. So as we can see, in certain times the President can use his discretion in appointing the Prime Minister. He has to see who has the capability of holding together the parties and forming a stable government. You must have heard about the no confidence motion. When the no confidence motion is passed in the Lok Sabha, the entire ministry has to resign. But in certain cases, the Prime Minister, instead of submitting his resignation, might ask the President to dissolve the Lok Sabha instead. In such a situation, the President has to use his discretion. In case of passing of a no confidence motion, the president should see the possibility of forming an alternate government at the center. That means he has to see that if even without dissolving the Lok Sabha, a stable new government can be formed. If not, then the Lok Sabha has to be dissolved and new elections will have to be held. Again, if the Prime Minister resigns, the President can explore the possibility of forming an alternative government, and if that is not possible, he has to dissolve the Lok Sabha. So if the Prime Minister resigns, the President has to look at all of the people who are trying to succeed the Prime Minister. If any of those people he feels has the possibility of forming a stable government that is holding together the party, then he can appoint that person as the Prime Minister. But again, if that is not possible, the Lok Sabha will have to be dissolved and new elections will have to be held. In case of sudden death of an incumbent Prime Minister, the President has to appoint a new Prime Minister if the ruling party is unable to meet immediately to elect a leader. So in case of sudden death of a Prime Minister in his office, the President's duty is to appoint a new temporary Prime Minister in case the ruling party is not able to immediately meet and elect a new Prime Minister. So when Jawaharlal Nehru died in 1964, the President appointed the senior-most leader of the party, Gulzari Lal Nanda, to become the caretaker Prime Minister. Gulzari Lal Nanda was in office for only 13 days, after which Lal Bahadur Shastri was appointed as the new Prime Minister of the country. Now let us go through the discretionary powers of the President. So the President can withhold a bill or send it back for reconsideration. And since the Constitution doesn't give a specific time frame within which the President will have to act on the bill, the President can exercise his pocket veto power. Thus, by keeping the veto in his pocket, that is not acting on it, the President can prevent the bill from becoming a law. Secondly, if no party or leader gets a majority support in the Lok Sabha, the President has the power to decide who should be appointed as the Prime Minister. So he has to look at the possibility of forming an alternate government. In the third point, we have that in case of no confidence motion, the President has to consider the possibility of forming an alternative government at the center. And lastly, the President has to use his discretion in times of resignation or death of the Prime Minister. So these are the discretionary powers of the President, where the President acts in his own will. Now let us talk about the military powers or military functions of the President. The President is the supreme commander of the armed forces. The armed forces of India has 3 branches: the Army, the Navy and the Air Force. So the President is the supreme commander of all of these branches, which means that the President gets to appoint the chief or the head of these branches as well. Now can you answer this question? Who is the supreme commander of the Indian Armed Forces? Is it the Prime Minister of India, the Field Marshal, the President or the Vice President? It is the President. The President is the supreme commander of the Indian Armed Forces. Along with being the supreme commander of the armed forces, the President has the power to make declarations of war and peace. So since the President is the first citizen of the country, he gets to declare war and peace. So the military powers of the President include that the President is the supreme commander of the defense forces of India, and the President has the power to make declarations of war and peace. Now let us talk about the diplomatic powers of the president. The president represents the country in international affairs. So he attends all of these international affairs and forums where his role is only ceremonial. You must have heard about an ambassador. Do you know who a foreign ambassador is? So an ambassador is the highest ranking representative of a country in another country with which this country has diplomatic relations. So the president appoints the Indian ambassadors to foreign countries and receives ambassadors from other foreign countries. India has foreign ambassadors for different countries who are appointed by the president, such as Rudendra Tandon, Vikram Misri and D.B. Venkatesh Verma. Along with these diplomatic powers, the president enters into treaties and agreements with foreign nations. So since the president is the first citizen of the country, he signs all of the agreements and treaties that are agreed upon internationally. Now let us go through the diplomatic powers. The president represents the country in international affairs. The president appoints Indian ambassadors to foreign countries and also receives ambassadors from foreign countries. Thirdly, the president enters into treaties and agreements with foreign nations. Lastly, we have the emergency powers. What do you think happens when a war is declared or a revolt takes place? An emergency is proclaimed. An emergency is a sudden, unforeseen event which demands immediate action. So, there are three types of emergencies given in the Constitution of India, which include the national emergency, emergency due to failure of constitutional machinery in a state, and financial emergency. And when an emergency has to be proclaimed, it is the president who proclaims the emergency. So the Constitution of India empowers the president to proclaim emergencies. So if there is an emergency, for example, if the security of India is at threat, the president has to issue a proclamation of emergency. During this time, the Union Executive assumes more responsibilities than usual. And since the president is the head of the Union Executive, he assumes many responsibilities. So, we understood what the emergency powers of the president are. So, finally, we've covered all the responsibilities and powers of the President of India. We've earlier talked about the executive, legislative and financial powers. And in this video, we've talked about the military, judicial, diplomatic, discretionary and the emergency powers of the President. All of these powers together make the President a true representative of the country, and he has to execute all of these functions efficiently. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million+ questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.